What's up, people? How y'all doing? Welcome to the show. Good Lord, good Lord. The Philadelphia Eagles got a ton going on. And like I said, I'm going to be here for it all. I know normally I'm off gallivanting somewhere doing something. But I'm going to be right here continuing to keep you guys abreast of what's going on, giving you my opinions, so forth and whatnot. And listen, there's a lot to get to. First of all, let's talk about Howie Roseman. There's a lot going on. Some fans are upset. Some fans are, hey, in Howie we trust. But at the end of the day, Howie asked for the fan base to be patient. Look, you guys, we're coming off a Super Bowl championship. Every Super Bowl champion has had to deal with this kind of stuff in one way or another. With the cap situation being the way that it is, and you guys got to understand there's two things at work here. Not only do you have the salary cap, but you have, cash considerations that you've got to think about too, because, every single time that Howie has restructured a deal, giving guys, an added bonus to move money off the cap, that's cash. That's cash, that the Eagles have to come out of pocket with. Cap space and cash are two different things. And you have to take both of those into account when you talk about, what's going on with this football team. Howie also has made the determination that we're going to go with these young guys and try to figure out a way to, draft well and develop well now that we've got, a defense coordinator and a staff that can do that. You can look for a lot of these younger players to get a chance to show what they can do because of what it means to the salary cap. I mean, listen, you got to think about it. Even though I'm not talking just cap numbers, what I'm talking is salaries. Just look over on the offensive side of the ball. 3 offensive linemen that are making, franchise position money. Lane, Landon, and Jordan Mailata. And you got Cam Jurgens that's pretty much up for an opportunity for him to be extended. You got 2 wide receivers, one making 30 million, the other one making well over 20 million. You got a running back who just got re-upped, and he is making, 20 million a year. So I think when you take all those things into consideration, you understand down the road what that's going to mean to the cap. You got to understand how we've got to make moves now to mitigate what's to come down the road. I just, I'm a little bit perplexed because I'm going to go through a little bit of everything that's going on. The guys that left, the guy that was traded, that's the hot topic of the day. And I do want to kind of get into that a little bit. You guys got to know that defensively, because of what we've lost starting wise, we've lost 4 starters off of last year's Super Bowl team, that this defense is going to look quite a bit different. That's not always a bad thing. The thing I'm curious about, because it's always a good thing, that you're drafting well, because those guys are going to be the foundations of your team. But at the other end of the spectrum, not only do you have to draft well, but you have to develop well. And when you're developing well, then you've got these rookie contracts that you got guys working on. So you got time to continue to be competitive before you actually have to pay each and every player at different positions. But the lightning rod today was C.J. Gardner-Johnson being traded to the Texans for an old offensive lineman. I forget his first name. Green, I believe, is his last name. Kenyon Green, and some late round picks. I was just as shocked and astonished as anybody else to actually see this happen, because they signed him to a um, 3-year deal last year, after jettisoning him, and then him going to Detroit for a year. So I thought that he would be here for a while. I think everybody thought that he would be here for a while. Um, let's just get out to the nuts and bolts of it. You guys all know, who've watched, that I've been a huge advocate for CJ Gardner-Johnson. And when they let him go, at the year after the 2022 Super Bowl loss, I was of the opinion that, hey, let's keep CJ Gardner-Johnson, and let's keep one or the other of the cornerbacks. Either keep Slay or keep Bradbury. But it didn't make sense to me to keep both of them and let the safety, who brought so much to the defense and led the defense with 6 interceptions, to let him walk. The contract didn't work out. He left, went to Detroit. He played 5 games in Detroit before he got injured. And then Howie brings him back. And I'm like, wow, what a great signing. Because I think that him and Reed Blankenship really work extremely well together. And then I wake up this morning and I'm looking and I see the notice that he's been traded. Let me just tell you something. I think there's a couple of things, and some of you guys have seen my comments on Twitter. I talked about it a little bit on Twitter, answered some people's questions earlier. I think there's a couple of things, at work here. He's a fiery player, and he loves to talk. And people say, well, hey, listen, BG loved to talk. You're 100% correct. BG does love to chat. But what BG doesn't do is he doesn't cross the line. You understand what I'm saying? He never crosses the line. He will talk, and when the play is over, he'll get back to the huddle. He may chatter a little bit more, but he never crosses the line with insults and things like what got CJ Gardner-Johnson ejected in the Washington game in week 16. So you got that. I don't know what goes on in the locker room. I've only heard good things about him out of the locker room, so I'm not sure. Then you have the dust up, with Slay last week, talking about who the next leaders could be on the defensive side of the ball. Slay leaving him out, and CJ taking exception to it. So there was some banter there. I think that there's a certain type of player that the Eagles want on this team. There's certain players that toe the line: a Saquon Barkley, a Jalen Hurts, a Brandon Graham, a Lane Johnson, guys that can lead by example, but they never walk too close to the line or across the line. Now, CJ is always walking extremely close to the line, okay? Well, I should say BG is walking close to the line, but he never crosses it. CJ crossed it. And I tell you what, I thought that he showed a lot of growth and a lot of maturity in the Super Bowl, where Travis Kelce tried to goad him, and he just kind of put his hands behind his back, and said, I'm not doing nothing. I'm not saying nothing. Do what you got to do, Travis. I thought that he showed a lot of maturity there. But obviously, there could possibly be some things that, rub the organization wrong about him. It could be a money situation. Not only him looking at some of the money that some of these other safeties are getting in the free agent market, but also, and maybe him asking for another extension, which would cause a lot of apprehension on the Eagles' part. But maybe it's a money move. You guys got to take into consideration, they drafted Sidney Brown to play. Sidney Brown, when he had a chance to play this year, played pretty well. And guess what? Sidney Brown's not going to cost them near as much as what it would cost them, the $8 million that they're going to save with CJ Gardner-Johnson. So you got to take all of those things into consideration. A lot of people are upset. A lot of people kind of came at me, you didn't like the guy. Listen, I always loved him. Always loved him. 12 interceptions in 2 seasons here. You know, fire, aggression, you know, a dog mindset, everything that you would want in a player. But sometimes things kind of run its course with an organization when a player fails to show the ability to grow up. Now, I'm going to give him kudos. And I know some of you guys who follow me on Twitter seen it. You know, he posted a goodbye. He said no hard feelings, you know, with the organization. Seems like he understands and understood what was coming. But I thought his farewell to Philadelphia was classy. And that's not a word that we hear used with the name CJ Gardner-Johnson. I thought it was very, very classy. And I was waiting for his tweet to talk about the trade, you know, and he showed tremendous maturity in that tweet. So I'm going to give him a lot of credit for that. But, you know, sometimes things go awry, things go sideways. Organization doesn't like certain things. The player, you know, has a hard time changing who he is, you know, because of how he is on the field and his mentality and his, you know, his ego is what makes him the player that he is. Some organizations don't like that. They can't handle that. So maybe that played a role in it. The fact that, you know, they feel like, you know, after being on 5 teams in 7 years or 4 teams in, you know, and 4 teams in 6 years. Listen, I'm speculating. I know he's been on 3 teams in the last 3 years. So that doesn't bode well for him, that the rest of the league is looking at that and seeing that and saying, what is wrong with this player that produces on the field, but he can't stay with an organization, you know, beyond a couple of years? So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't have any inside information. I don't know whether he asked for a new contract and that pissed off the organization. I don't know. I just know that the Eagles have made a decision to make the trade. They got Kenyon Green in the trade with a couple of draft picks, late draft picks. Let's talk about what Kenyon Green means to the potential of Mekhi Becton returning. I mean, you got to believe, you got to think that that's not going to happen now, just because, you know, now you've got another offensive lineman, you know, in the fold. You got Tyler Steen that filled in and played last year under a rookie contract. This may be another one of those situations where the Eagles look at this thing and say, hey, you know, we've got a guy we just traded for who hasn't been all that great on his previous team, but first round draft pick, but we got Stoutland University. And if Jeff Stoutland can turn a guy like Jordan Mailata, who never played in the National Football League, never played football before, period, in his life, you know, into the product that he is, and take a guy like Mekhi Becton, who had 1 foot out of the league and 1 foot in the league after leaving the Jets, and turn him into, you know, in my opinion, Pro Bowl worthy player last year, then maybe we can do that with Kenyon Green. And we don't have to pay him. Maybe Mekhi Becton's market, you know, maybe the Eagles are waiting to see what his market value is going to be on the free agent market. You just never know. I just feel like the offensive line sometimes and the defensive line at times are positions you don't mess with, especially when you have the type of season that the Eagles offense had last year. I would love to see Mekhi Becton come back and you have everybody in the fold, but also understand and realize that, guess what? Sometimes that's just not possible. It's not possible to bring back everybody you want to bring back from a financial standpoint. So what is that going to look like? Wow. Dallas Goedert. I don't know if there's any validity to this or not, but rumor has it that he's been given permission to seek a trade. You guys know how I feel about Dallas Goedert. I think, you know, he could potentially be a superstar in waiting. The knock on him is he has not been able to stay healthy. I don't think he's played a full season since he's been a Philadelphia Eagles. He's had some kind of injury almost every year of his career. He's coming up on his second contract, which means that, he's going to want an improvement on his contract, even though he's been injured. And maybe the Eagles are looking at it like, hey, it's time to move on. But they don't normally deal with the tight end position the way that they're dealing with Dallas Goedert, if it's true that they've given him permission to seek a trade. Normally what they do is they draft their tight end in waiting. He plays a year or two with, the current number one tight end before they move on. They did it with Brent Selleck, I should say, and Zach Ertz. They did it with Zach Ertz when they drafted Dallas Goedert. But this is a switch in protocol of how they actually handle the tight end position. So it's going to be real interesting to see, can they get a deal done and bring him back? Or is it a foregone conclusion that Dallas Goedert is not going to be a part of this football team next year because they've given him permission to find a trade partner? And what are we going to do? Listen, I know that there's a lot of good offensive linemen. There's a lot of good tight ends in this draft coming up, but with this window wide open for a Super Bowl, in my opinion, at least the next 2 or 3 years, are we going to chance losing such a viable piece of our offense and Dallas Goedert, for somebody that we draft? And I get it. We got, Jack Stoll. We got Grant Calcaterra. But neither one of those guys are really known for their blocking, and potentially are the Eagles going to, go out, maybe bring in a veteran, blocking tight end from somewhere else? They certainly got plenty of guys. They got Jenkins, who is another pass catching tight end. So they definitely have plenty of weapons from a passing standpoint. But I don't think this team anytime soon is going to I apologize. I just lost my thought. My wife just slid me a piece of paper and I just got something in my head. I don't think that, Dallas Goedert is the type of player that you can necessarily replace. And like I said, Grant Calcaterra, he showed some promise catching the ball, but is he going to be a weapon blocking? You're not going to abandon the run game, Saquon Barkley, and what they do. I would expect with the changes on the defensive side of the ball, this will be another developmental year, believe it or not. As much as the Eagles developed what they were doing last year on the fly and quickly, this may be another developmental year for the defense, trying to put a bunch of new pieces together in the defense and trying to get them ready to be, Super Bowl ready and Super Bowl dominant. All of this money that the Eagles are trying to save, I think, you have to focus on the potential for Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith to be coming up on. And you got, like I said, you got Cam Jurgens as well. Like I said, I think these guys are probably coming up on the radar as guys that Howie wants to extend. But when you look at on the offensive side of the ball, the majority of the money has been spent on the offensive side of the ball. And I think that, they're trying to save money to make sure that the offense can be as potent, as powerful as it was last year. And I would certainly look for the offense to look a little bit different next year. I think by way of a younger defense, a defense having to grow again into what they became this year with younger players, that you're probably going to have Jalen Hurts throw the ball a little more. The passing game has got to be a little bit more prolific. Teams are going to be gearing up and looking at what Kansas City did in the Super Bowl to limit Saquon and try to mimic some of those things. So there are going to be some opportunities for Jalen to throw the ball quite a bit more next year and utilize, his wide receiver core. I'm just throwing it out there. We're 24 hours or less away from, the free agency period, going live. And, I'm just here, to talk about what's transpired and what's to come. So let's dive into the guys that have left. First of all, you got Josh Sweat. left and went to the Arizona Cardinals on a $76 million deal. And by the way, I can understand why, these guys probably weren't offered. When you look and think about, what the Eagles are doing, it was probably a foregone conclusion that this was going to happen. And I think Howie's kind of tried to prep us and set us up along the way that this is probably what was going to happen. Then you got Milton Williams on a 4-year deal to the New England Patriots. Darius Slay on a 1-year deal after being released by the Philadelphia Eagles, signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And obviously, C.J. Gardner-Johnson gone in a trade today to the Texans. Here's my opinion on all 4 guys that are gone. And it's irrelevant because they're gone, but just for the sake of understanding what and how the Eagles need to improve, I think it's important to, at least talk about it. Josh Sweat. I think Sweaty has had 1 double-digit sack season. I believe it was the 2022 season. I believe he had 11 sacks. He's a guy that's right there around, an 8-9 sack a season guy. Will he be missed? Obviously, but I don't think he's going to be missed at that number. As great as Josh Sweat was, and it was a hell of a Super Bowl by him, he kind of intimated that, he probably should have been the Super Bowl MVP. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I had him at 2 sacks instead of, 2.5, because that sack that Jalix Hunt got, that they gave him half of, Jalix Hunt actually had the guy wrapped up first. I don't know what the statistician was looking at when he gave him half of that sack, but that whole sack belonged to Jalix Hunt. Here's my issue with Josh Sweat, and that type of money, and why it was, a foregone conclusion that he's probably going to be gone. $17, $18 million a year, I think, is what it comes out to be. For a guy who isn't a consistent double-digit sack guy, I'm out on that. I think that, with his age, his mileage, and listen, I'm not hating on anybody. Go get your bag. You got to do what you got to do. You got to get your money. When I left Philly in 94, trust me, it was just as much about me getting the hell away from Norman Brayman and Richie Kotite. Getting my bag was just as much a part of it as anything else. So I get it. I understand wholeheartedly. You got to strike when the iron's hot, and you got to try to make as much as you can, for as long as you can. So, but my point is, Sweat has some injury issues this year. To me, he's not overly consistent when you talk about, a guy that dominates every single game. Like, he'll have some games where he dominates and then he'll disappear for a few games. To me, if I'm a GM, that kind of player is not worthy, in my opinion, of $76 million. Now, if the Arizona Cardinals want to give it to him, and by God, he's willing to take it, God bless him. More power to him. But if I'm the GM, I'm only giving that kind of money to a guy that shows up in flashes, game in, game out, game in, game out. That's why I was such an advocate for Howie trying to figure out a way to go and get Myles Garrett. But now that I'm looking at the situation, that probably was never even an issue. And then he goes and gets $40 million a year from the Cleveland Browns. I mean, the question has to be asked, was it always about the money, Myles, or, were you positioning to put the Browns in a situation where they would extend you and make you, the highest paid non-quarterback player in the National Football League? Good Lord. They're going to be starting quarterbacks this year that will play for less than Myles Garrett will play for as a starter on the defensive side of the ball, and he'll probably play 75 to 80% of the plays, the way that the NFL is run nowadays. But that dream went up in a cloud of smoke, understanding what the Eagles' financial situation was now We just can see that that was never a consideration. Let's talk about Milton Williams. Milton is a guy who was thrusted into more playing time once the Eagles came to the realization that Jordan Davis wasn't going to be the every down player. And Milton played some great football all season long. He played great football. And for as young as he is, you know, I don't know that $25 million a year, because, you know, the Eagles did a lot of rotating, you know, and maybe it's just, this is the new NFL. This is just the way it is. The money is just so exorbitant that, you know, you got to spend it. And teams who are trying to get back to the promised land and trying to get back to prominence are willing to spend it. And guys, when they have their moment, they got to take advantage of it while they can. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think Milton Williams is only going to get better, you know, as a young defensive tackle. Can he be dominant? And that's the big question for me. When you pay a guy $25 to $26 million a year, the question always for me is, can he be as dominant of a player as, you know, the contract, you know, says he can be? And in a lot of ways, you know, let's talk about these contracts and what they mean. These contracts sometimes are as much about what you have done as it is about what you're gonna do. Okay. Teams pay for what you've done under the pretext that you can come to their team and do the same thing. You know, so it's half reward, half expectation, in my opinion. So I get it. I understand. But I think the Eagles, more than Josh Sweat, you know, are going to miss Milton Williams and what he means to this defense, because Jordan Davis still can't be an every down player. He just can't. You guys heard me talk about it, and I'll continue to say it until he gets down to about 225 to 230 and get on, you know, some kind of footwork program, get a jump rope, and start to get serious about his body. You know, he's just not going to be a player that can give you 60 to 65% of the plays. And I think that, you know, when you play against a passing team, you know, I think Vic Fangio knows that he can't be that type of player. Oh, by the way, he's another one of those guys that's in the wheelhouse at some point in time for an extension. Darius Slay to the Pittsburgh Steelers. A lot of people, you know, and it's up for debate. If it's your opinion, it's your opinion. A lot of people believe that Slay had a hell of a year. He's been solid. You guys know how I feel about the situation. I think that late in the season, he played a hell of a lot better than he did in the beginning of the season. More specifically, towards the end of the season, he was serviceable, in my opinion. I think he had one interception this year. In the playoff game. That ball was just thrown right to him. You had to be Ray Charles not to catch that damn ball. But I also think that, you know, with his age and some of the young talent that the Eagles have on this roster, that it was time. You know, I think Howie believed that. I certainly believe that, because I felt like, you know, after the way he played last year, that was a foregone conclusion that they may move on, you know, last year, at the beginning of this year, rather. But, you know, he was back for the year, got him a Super Bowl ring, and, you know, good for him. But at the number that he's looking at, I can understand why Howie decided to release him and move on and let him test the market. Obviously, Pittsburgh's in the market for, you know, another corner. It'll be interesting to see how that plans out. You know, Pittsburgh likes to play, you know, a little more man to man. That used to be Slay's forte back in the day. But I don't think Slay's got a lot left in the tank, you know, to give. And he stayed injured all season long. I I would really have liked to seen, um, the cornerback that we had from the Indianapolis Colts. He left as well. His name will come to me in a minute. Let me go to the chat. You guys, somebody will tell me what the heck his name is. Rogers, Isaiah Rogers. Thank you, Jack. I really thought that Isaiah Rogers could be the complement to Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. But obviously, the Eagles are pretty high on Kelee Ringo. And I guess on some level, they're going to give him the opportunity, to be the starter on the other side. It's a lot of youth on the back end. You got Sidney Brown, young kid. Reed Blankenship is going to be the elder statesman when it's all said and done. Unless the Eagles draft somebody or bring in, another veteran corner and say, okay, let's have a competition here. Somehow, some way, Kelee gets beat out. People have their opinions about him. I think that, he is a big cornerback. I met him last offseason, and I was astonished at how big he is. Some people are talking about Eli Ricks. I think Eli is a little on the light side. He needs to get in the gym and be more physical. The thing about Kelee Ringo is, A, he will hit you, and B, he is a big, physical cornerback, tall. I didn't realize he was that tall. And I'm not a big fan of tall cornerbacks because I sense that, I've always believed that cornerbacks who are like 6'1", 6'2", the issue is start and stop lead. And when you got long legs, it is so hard to like stop your feet and then kick it up to 60 again. Well, these young guys can get from 0 to 60 like that. That's the thing that worries about me. He's got good speed. There's no doubt about it. But to me, a lot of times it looks like it's linear speed, where once he gets going, he can run with anybody. But if you stop or double move or anything like that, him being able to get back to top speed to run with these wide receivers that are running 4.2, 4.3, and low 4.4, that can be problematic. That's why I liked, and somebody said, oh, he's a 4.3 guy, but I just said he's a linear guy. 4.3 40 is linear. That's a straight line. That's a big, big difference between being able to stop your feet and then getting at top speed all over again. It's a major difference. But I always thought that somehow, some way, the way that he likes to hit, that he may be, a safety down the road. But we'll see. We'll see, how it all plans out, how it all works out, I should say. CJ Gardner-Johnson. Next guy up should be Sidney Brown. The question is, can he stay healthy? And, can he temper the way that he plays? Listen, I like Sidney Brown. I like the way he plays the game. The problem is, football is a game where you've got to temper your speeds. Like Sidney Brown is 120 miles an hour all the time. And you can't play in the National Football League that way. You've got to figure out how to, know when to go 120 miles an hour and when to throttle it back to 60, and when to take it up to 70, and when to bring it back down to 50, and when to go back up to 90. That's just the way you have to play. Sidney is all out all the time. He's coming to make a tackle. He's either going to blow you up or he's going to miss it. He's got to learn how to, get his angles. In a lot of ways, football is geometry, because when you're talking about tackling, you got to take the right angle at all times. You got to understand where your help is. And when you're going 120 miles an hour, it's hard to adjust. Wide receiver sees you coming, and he's got to understand there are times where you can blow a player up. But I'm telling you right now, that's only once in a blue moon. Once in a blue moon. Because if an NFL wide receiver sees you coming and you're coming 120 miles an hour and you're out of control, he's going to make you miss. Okay. The important thing is getting the guy down on the ground. So sometimes, you got to throttle it down from 120 to 70 just to make the tackle, because the objective is to get the guy on the ground. Not every tackle is a blow-up deal. Now, if somebody's got a wide receiver lined up like Malcolm Jenkins did, in the Super Bowl, well, if somebody's got him occupied and the guy don't see you, well, undress him. I don't have a problem with that. But that guy's got eyes on you. The chance of you getting a kill shot, 0%. 0%. Because these guys are too crafty. Unless you take the perfect angle with the perfect speed. Like if he's coming inside out and he's attacking that inside leg and he's going 120 miles an hour and he's got the proper angle, well, guess what? Yeah, you can get a big hit there. Okay. But 9 times out of 10, because of how the angles are played in the game, it's very rare, that players get the perfect angle. So you got to learn how to just throttle it down, get the legs, wrap up. Even if you don't get him down, just hold on. The cavalry's coming. That's just the way that you have to play. But I'm excited to see, can he pick up the defense, okay? And can he be that replacement? Can he translate his aggression and his physicality and stay healthy enough to be a starter in the National Football League? That's, we'll see. This Lewis Cine kid, he's another one, another Georgia kid that the Eagles signed, I think, to a futures contract at the end of the year. Curious to see how he will pan out for the Eagles as time goes on. Because I'm telling you, man, at the end of the day, competition is like the tide. It raises all boats. It's the best way to figure out who wants to play and who doesn't. The cream always rises to the top. So we'll see. Somebody just said, Christian McCollum was ahead of him on the depth chart. I think Christian was ahead of him because, Christian was healthy all year long. And Sidney Brown had to come off of injured reserve at one point. Cine is another guy, from what I remember, that will undress you. He's a hitter, very physical, but another guy with great speed, kind of like Sidney Brown, who doesn't have, a governor on himself, and you playing safety, because you got to remember, you, at the end of the day, are going to be the last line of defense and nothing else matters. So the most important thing for you to do is to make the tackle by all means necessary. Not every shot is going to be a kill shot. Another move, Kenny Pickett traded for Dorian, I forget his middle name, Thompson. Listen, I'm ecstatic about this, because guess what? When he was coming out of college, I said, we need to draft this kid as Jalen Hurts' backup. Why? Okay. Listen, Tanner McKee is by far, has proven that he's worthy enough to be the starter. Dorian Thompson Robinson. Dorian Thompson Robinson. Thank you, Anthony. Tanner McKee is going to be the guy because he's proven that he can step in and he can get the job done. But I've always said that I want the Eagles need to, at some point in time, and this is my take on what's potentially going to happen. Okay, I believe that the Eagles will continue to develop Tanner McKee, and at some point in time, because of how they run their offense, that he is going to be trade bait somewhere down the line for the Eagles to be able to get draft capital. The Eagles always keep talking about how they are, quarterback you. But the reason why I like Dorian Thompson-Robinson is because a lot of the things that he does, a lot of the things that he can do simulates what Jalen Hurts can do. He can run the read option. He can run the RPO. He's got a pretty decent arm. Okay. You know, you don't have to change a whole game plan when Jalen gets hurt. And it's not a matter if he gets hurt. We just know that he's going to get hurt. It's happened the last 2-3 years in a row. At some point down the road, he misses, you know, a game or two. And then you get a Kenny Pickett that comes in. And all of a sudden, your entire offense has to change because Kenny Pickett can't run the RPO. There's no threat of him pulling the ball and running it. And now you let Washington's defense load the box and shut Saquon down. That, in essence, to me, and C.J. Gardner getting kicked out of the game is the reason why they lost to Washington in Week 16. But a guy like Dorian Thompson, I think I got that right. he has the ability to run a lot of the same things that Jalen can run. So when Jalen gets hurt, they don't have to change the entire offense. You can just plug a guy in. I've been saying this for years. Go draft a guy that might not be as good as Jalen, but can do some of the things that Jalen can do. Because when you have an injury, instead of you having to just scrap the whole playbook and have to scrap the whole game plan, you got a guy that you can just plug in and let him do the same things. Now, somebody said, hey, he's got a problem throwing the ball, to the wrong color jersey. Sometimes it's coaching. You guys know that. Sometimes it's simply just coaching, getting with the right coach that develops you the right way, that helps you grow as a quarterback, that allows you to slowly progress. Now, I'm not talking about this guy coming in and being the backup within the next year, but realistically, by the time Tanner McKee's deal is done, now he may be in a position where Thompson can now step in and be that backup where the Eagles don't have to scrap the entire playbook when Jalen gets hurt. I was excited about this trade because I really wanted the Eagles to draft him, maybe the 4th or 5th round. And I forget who it was. Somebody snatched him up before the Eagles, could get to him. But I like that move. We got about 17 minutes left. So I think what I'm going to do is I am going to take some questions from you guys. And I've just been chirping and talking. But I'm going to go all the way back to the top of the chat and take some questions from there because I think there's been a lot of comments where you guys are talking about the things that I'm talking about, but there's also, some pretty good, questions here. So let me see. Let me go back. I'm running the ship all by myself today. So let's see what we got. We got Philly. I'm glad you're here to shine some light on free agency. Well, listen, I am too. That's not necessarily a question, more so a comment. But yeah, I know last year, previous years, I've kind of disappeared on you guys. But I'm going to be around this off season a little bit more, keep you guys, and keep you guys abreast of, what I'm thinking. Let's deal with this one. Justin Morris, what do I think about Bryce Huff? I see the reports today that, some people are saying that they're probably going to use him as trade bait at some time because he wasn't a fit. That's an understatement. I don't think, he ever was a fit. I think when you sign a player, not all players are the same. sometimes when you sign a player, and it's very rare that you see free agent signings work out the way the teams really want them to work out. I think that's one of the reasons why Howie doesn't do a lot of free agent signings unless, it's like when we had Linville Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, we had a need in season. So we brought those guys on. But Howie doesn't do a lot of free agent signings if you really stop and look at it. It's one here or there over the years. And I think the reason why is because a lot of these guys that we sign as free agents, they don't work out. And they don't work out for a myriad of reasons. I think sometimes organizations look at a player, have success in one system, and project those players into their system, not really recognizing that they're two different systems, that they're being asked to do two different things. Like what the Jets under Robert Saleh asked Bryce Huff to do was completely different than what he was asked to do here in Philadelphia with the added pressure, of a 50, 51, $52 million contract. And everybody kept talking about it. Everybody, listen, and I get it was a big deal because we let Hassan Reddick walk up out of here. And then we go and we sign this guy, and he's supposed to be the heir apparent to a guy that's giving you double-digit sacks 3 years in a row. So I understand the pressure. Not everybody's built for that kind of pressure. Not everybody's built for that type of situation, And I think the best thing that could happen for Bryce Huff is a fresh start somewhere else. I just don't believe or know that could ever happen because teams seen the lack of productivity this year, and they realize that it's a project. And when you trade him, guess what? That contract goes with him. How many teams are going to risk that kind of, cap space on a guy that nobody's sure that he can replicate what he did in 2023? So that's a problem for the Eagles, unless it's one of those situations where it's players, draft picks, draft compensations. Oh, we're just going to throw this guy in, as a kicker. But, the Eagles are going to have a hard time, moving that salary, off the books unless Howie, does some magic or set the contract up in a way where maybe after next year they can just get out of the third year. It'll be interesting to see what winds up happening with him. Allie wants to know, what do I think about Saquon, rewarding Saquon early in his contract? Listen, when a guy has a historic year, I really don't have a problem with it, but I do think that you set a precedent, for other guys down the road to look at how the Eagles took care of Saquon, in year 2 of a 3-year deal and re-up him and make him the highest paid running back, in the National Football League at $20 million a year. Listen, he's worth every penny of it. Am I certain that they needed to do it? Am I certain that it needed to be that much? That I'm not sure about. That I'm not sure about. But I don't know. I'm not privy to the conversations that transpired between Saquon and the Eagles. Maybe there was a negotiation that was, maybe he wanted more than 13 that they gave him last year. And maybe he said, well, hey, if I meet these milestones, that, we'll go back and we'll have a conversation. But my gosh, I don't know all the salaries for starting running backs in the National Football League, but I don't think there's another one besides Christian McCaffrey that's even close to that number. And I think Christian McCaffrey's number is like 15, 16, maybe 17 at the most. So they just blew right by that. They didn't go a million over. They just blew right through it, Now, I'm not saying he's not worth it, Allie, but, who knows? The Eagles saw fit to do it. I think he's worth it. And by God, if he can get it all. Get as much as you can get, as long as you can get it. And he'll certainly be motivated to come out and try to put together another season like he did last season. I just saw that's you, Ali Barubi. How you doing? All right, let's find us another question here. We got about 10 more minutes. Let's see. I think I'm gonna have to go down. Let's see. My man Terrace Hard said, the trenches is a great place to spend your money. Listen, I agree. I think that, I think we've seen that this year in this Super Bowl win. It's never been more important or impressive to me than this year. When you look at the offensive dominance, you have to give the offensive line, Lane Johnson, Kai Becton, Cam Jurgens, Landon Dickerson, and Jordan Mailata, and the guys that, Fred Johnson, Tyler Steen, those other guys who had to step in at different points in time during the season due to injury. You got to give those guys a lot of credit because Saquon's not doing what he's doing if those guys aren't getting it done. They're not dominating up front. And that shift, that change in week 6 of the season where they made the decision to make Saquon, make the offense run through Saquon, that was absolutely huge. So, yeah, it's huge. You got to spend the money there. But I'm not so sure that you can have 5 guys on your offensive line, making top 3 in the NFL money. These contracts are going to come back to roost. At some point in time, as much as I love Lane Johnson, and he's still playing at a high level, still a Pro Bowler, should have been first team Pro Bowler this year, But when you start to look at what's important, and they just re-upped, just extended Jordan Mailata last year and got Dickerson done last year. How much more capital? And I get it. Cap's going up again this year, another 23 to 24 million bucks. But it's not so much how much the cap goes up and how much the Eagles are under the cap as it is, how much cash they've expended, and how these contracts, the way that they're structured within the next 3 to 5 years, how that's going to affect the Eagles, because at some point in time, they are going to have to take a step back if some of these contracts don't come off the board. So it'll be interesting to see, even on the defensive side of the ball. We had a dominant defensive front. Nobody's seen it coming, but they were dominant this year. How do you take a unit that was ranked 31st in total defense last year, and in the last 16 weeks of the season, turn them into the number 1 defense in the National Football League? The only way that you do that is you are dominant at the defensive tackle position. And like I said, Jalen Carter, when he's up, he's probably going to be the highest paid defensive tackle, in the National Football League. Jordan Davis, is there any intuition? Is there any want to keep him on the roster beyond his rookie contract? As a, under top 15 pick, you certainly have the opportunity, I believe, the 5th-year option in it. But, we'll see how all that works out, as time goes on. Nolan Smith's development after BG goes down. Whether BG comes back. That's another thing that we haven't necessarily, talked on and touched on. I did an event, one-on-one, at the airport with BG last Friday. And, of course, I had to ask him, are you coming back? I said, I know what your answer is going to be, but I'd be, remiss in my duties if I didn't ask you whether you were coming back. And I'm not trying to break any news or anything, but the fans want to know. He retore his tricep, but I think Brandon's got a lot of gas left in the tank, and I think it'll come down to whether, the Eagles want to bring him back. And I told him, I thought that he was playing the best that I seen him play in his career right before, the injury happened. He was just on fire, just playing some great football, especially in that Rams game where he tore it. I mean, he was just giving Matthew Stafford nightmares. But, do you bring him back? I certainly would say yes, because, what a lot of people don't realize is that Brandon can play across the board. A lot of his big plays, the strip sack on Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, that came when he was playing defensive tackle. That was their NASCAR package, and I've said for years, very few players have the ability to do it, but BG has the ability to do it because of how he's built. He's a shorter defensive end, 6'2", 6'3", but he is just solid, and his quickness can dominate, offensive guards and centers if you move him in the defensive tackle and pass rush situation. So I would like to see, them bring BG back, but, we'll see. Time will tell. All right, let me scroll down a little bit, see if I can't find some other questions here. Oh, wow. Don says, I think the last 2 days felt worse than losing the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Man, come on. I think that we have to enjoy the good time. I talked to BG about the importance of him being a part of the only two teams to win a Super Bowl in Philadelphia Eagles history. It took 57 years for the Eagles to win a modern day Super Bowl. It took 64 years for the Eagles to win their second Super Bowl. We're reigning champions. We get to walk around with our chests puffed out, until next year this time. If by some stretch of the imagination, they get back and repeat, okay? So sometimes we just got to be happy with the good things, that happen to us as a fan base. There is no reason for us to be feeling bad or to be upset, because this isn't what we're witnessing is not something, that's exclusive to the Philadelphia Eagles. Come on. Unless a team has assets, every single team that wins a Super Bowl goes through this, because you're going to have players, this is what I talk about when I say the importance of winning. This is why I always say it's important to win. There's 3 types of players. There's the player that plays for notoriety, the player that plays for money, and the player that plays to be great. Now you understand why it's so difficult to put together great teams. Because the guy that plays for notoriety, he's never going to be committed to making himself better and doing what's best for the football team. Only thing he likes is when he rolls out, oh, that's so-and-so, he plays with the Eagles. Come on, man. Then the guy that plays for the money, he will play his ass off to get the money, and then he'll exhale when he gets the money, not realizing that guess what? The minute you get the money is the time that you got to continue to play at a high level. Because if you don't, 2-3 years down the road, they're gonna come to you. Hey, man, we need you to take a pay cut. We need to do something about your salary, or we're gonna have to let you go if they structure it in a way where they can let you go without it hurting the cap too much. But give me the player that wants to be a champion. If I had 53 of those guys, the Eagles would win Super Bowls every single year, because they're committed to doing what's necessary to win, and they understand that notoriety and money comes to a certain percentage of the guys who play on Super Bowl winning team, that all that stuff takes care of itself, that you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. If I just ball and I work hard and I take care of my business and we win a Super Bowl, a certain amount of players are going to get what they deserve. That's what we're experiencing right now. And this is not exclusive to the Eagles, Don. So don't feel bad. The offense is still going to be prolific. And Howie's going to figure out a way to get the defense back to where it needs to be. And this team is going to be Super Bowl contenders at least the next 2 to 3 years. Some of these young guys are going to have to grow up fast on the defensive side of the ball. And Vic Fangio is going to have to work some of his magic with some of these other players, some of these other young players who are going to have to step in for guys that step away. And by the way, congrats to my man before I get out of here, Zach Bond, for that awesome contract. And congrats to the Eagles and Howie Roseman for getting it done and seeing the value of a playmaking linebacker for this defense and on this team again and moving away from how we've been doing it over the last few years. All right. I'm going to wrap right there, folks. I will be back right here next week. I think I'll be back next week. I'll let you know via social media. I'm actually going to Florida to play in this golf tournament next week. And I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to leave Tuesday or Wednesday. If I'm flying, I obviously won't be able to do it. But if something jumps off, maybe I'll do an emergency podcast. Where I'll just get on for 30 seconds, but I'll let you guys know via social media. You guys, you follow me, you see, Instagram, Facebook, and, my all-time favorite, X, Twitter. But I'll keep you guys abreast of what's going on. All right. But as usual, I'm going to sign off. Go Birds. Don't worry, be happy. Howie's going to get it done. All right. And as usual, take care of each other and be good to each other. Most important, make sure you love each other. All right. I'll see you guys either next week, right here, same place, same time, or the following week. All right. Peace.